I prefer to start businesses from scratch. It's just the way I like it. And I've started my chain of business to business magazines. I started that from scratch. Started my weekly newspaper from scratch. Started my 2 national trade show companies from scratch. Started my radio program from scratch. I could go on and on and on about me starting businesses. And the fact is, I've always started them from scratch. Even my very first business, which was a cleaning service, my very first business, started that from scratch. It's not the easiest road to go down, but you know what? It's the road that I prefer to travel. Now, one thing that always came up in every single business that I started was, what do I charge? What do I charge for my product? What do I charge for my service? Well, in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the lessons that I learned. In fact, what I'll do is I'm going to tell you about the 8 common, I would just say top pricing strategies that companies use. And virtually every company out there, large or small, will use one of these 8 pricing strategies. This is a good roadmap for you. It's a good guide. Look at these strategies, follow what I'm saying, take some notes, and I think what you're going to find at the end of this video is I think you're going to find a way that you can price your product or your service. That, my friends, that's up next right here on Side Hustle Rules. Come on! Welcome back to Side Hustle Rules. My name is Lou Reyes. In this video, I'm going to be telling you about the top 8 pricing strategies. Now, these are strategies that companies large or small will use, whether they're a service business, a manufacturer, or a retailer. They all use one or more of these pricing strategies in the course of their business. Before I get into it, though, I want to mention in the description box, I've got a link to my free Side Hustle Starter Kit. That kit, it walks you through the 8 steps, the first 8 steps of starting a business from scratch. And you can find a link to my Side Hustle Starter Kit in the description box. So now let's get to our video. Before you pick one of, or maybe a couple of the pricing strategies, the 8 pricing strategies that I'm going to be telling you about in this video, I want you to think about 2 things. Number 1, think about the math. Think about what your product costs you to make. And consider, when you're thinking about that, think about all the expenses. It includes the rent, the rent of your building, if you have a building or an office. It includes your production costs, your marketing costs. It includes everything that goes into baking, to making that product. So you've always got to be thinking about, what is this going to cost me to make? The number 2, and this, I believe, is extremely valuable and maybe even more valuable to know than what the costs are. You've got to know what the customer is going to value your product at. Because you can create a product and you can charge a low price or a high price for that product. But if the customer doesn't see the value, if they don't see the value, then you're not going to sell the product no matter what pricing strategy you adopt or you come up with. So I'm going to ask you to look at the math, but also look at the value that you're offering, because you've got to offer the consumer value. And as a matter of fact, that should be top of mind. Yeah, we're going to look at costs, we're going to look at numbers, but think about the value to the customer. Will they see the value? That's so important. So now let me get into the 8 pricing strategies. Number 1 is cost price pricing. And this simply means using this formula, cost plus markup equal price. And the markup is variable. It depends on your particular type of business. It's going to be different in retail. It's going to be different in manufacturing. It's certainly going to be different in the different service industries. But you always, when you're thinking about what that markup is going to be, you got to think of a couple things. You got to think about the demand for that product, and you have to think about the competition, because you can look at your margin, you can come up with a percentage that I'm going to add to my costs. But if you do that and you're not competitive, well, that's not a strategy that you want to use. But it's a simple strategy, cost, price, pricing. Number 2 is competitive pricing, and this is a strategy that I've used myself. Now, this is when you go out and you check out your competitors, and more than one competitor you're going to want to look at, and you're going to do that to determine what the going rate is. You want to see what they're charging. Now, when you do this, what I find is sellers, they often price their products slightly lower, and they do it to attract a value shopper. Maybe you could even charge a little bit higher price, and you're doing that to signal that your product may be better quality. I mentioned that I've done this myself, and I recommend if you are going to use this strategy that you check out multiple competitors to get an idea of what the going rate is. And then you determine, do I want to charge higher or do I want to charge lower? A couple examples of this type of pricing is Starbucks or I should say Starbucks versus a Dunkin' Donut. You can see the difference in the quality and what they're promising. Price skimming. Now, this is when a company charges the highest price possible, and then what they do over time is they decrease that price. And if you're thinking about an example, think about Tesla, because that's exactly what they're doing right now. Now, price skimming works best when there's scarcity in the product. And this strategy also works best when your product is a standout product and it's got features that other companies, they just can't compete with. So when you're thinking about price skimming, if it's a strategy that you decide to do, you've got to make sure that there is scarcity in the marketplace, that you're an innovative product, but also know that over time, you're going to end up lowering the price. Penetration pricing. Now, this is when you use a low price to enter a market. In this strategy, it's used with the intention of taking market share, grabbing market share from competitors. And then slowly what inevitably happens is you raise that price, and you raise that price only after you've gained market share. Now, this does work. Matter of fact, I've used this strategy. I used it in my first business. I mentioned my cleaning business, my home cleaning business. I use that strategy, and it works to gain market share. But if you use that strategy, be sure, or I should say, be careful, because what happens is customers rely on that strategy, especially if you're in a service business. They're thinking that's what the price is always going to be, and there's always going to be some pushback when you decide you're going to raise that price. Value-based pricing. It's one of my favorite ways to price a product. Now, this is when you set the price at how much that customer perceives that product to be worth. And what they do is they determine value-based pricing using basically four steps. First, they find out what customers pay for a similar product. Second, what they do is they list what makes that product, their product, different, what makes it better. Number three, they place a value on those differentiating features. And number four, what they're great at doing is they communicate that extra value, the extra value that their product provides to the customer. Now, value-based pricing, what I love about it, it's a great way to build customer loyalty. And when you're thinking about this type of pricing, think about some of the luxury brands, or think about the shoe company Nike, how they use value-based pricing to sell their products. Loss leader pricing. Now, this is when you intentionally price a product for a loss. And the idea is, as you price that product for loss, you make it attractive. You get people coming through the door where they may buy, hopefully, where they're going to buy other items. And the goal, of course, is to make your profit on those other items. In this strategy, it's employed by larger organizations that have other products that they can sell to make up for the loss. And when you're thinking about this type of pricing, think about companies like let's just say a Target, where they'll advertise that they sell eggs for $1 a dozen or a couple dollars a dozen, whatever it is. But then you come in, you buy the eggs, and then what you end up buying is you buy pancake mix, which might have a higher margin, or you're buying some beverages, or then you go over to the diaper aisle and you're buying diapers. But with a Target, and companies like Target, they're larger. They can afford this type of loss leader pricing. But it does work, but it works primarily best, I believe, when you're a larger organization. Anchor pricing. Anchor pricing is when the seller compares the current price versus the discount price. And you see this all the time, especially in retail. They'll list their current price, their regular price, their discount price, and then they show you what you're saving. And that first price, their regular price, is what they call the anchor. And retailers, they use this pricing strategy. They've been using it for years. So this is a strategy that does work as long as you don't use it too often. Well, there you go, my friends. I've just given you 8 steps. See, what I consider the 8 top pricing strategies that you can use when you're pricing a product, whether you're pricing a service product or a manufactured product, or maybe even when you're in retail, you can use one or more of these pricing strategies. But I do want to mention something that I did mention at the beginning of this video. It's really all about value. It's all about value. If you offer great value to your customer, you will win. You will always win, but you've got to offer great value. So whatever pricing strategy that you come up with, whatever you determine your cost to be, whatever margin you add on there, it does you no good if you don't offer great value. So that's all I got for you. I do want to mention, before I forget actually, I want to mention that in the description box of this video, I do have a link to my free Side Hustle Starter Kit. Check it out. It's absolutely free. I also want to mention that I am going to start producing a live show Saturday morning. Right now we're scheduled for 10 o'clock on Patreon, on the Side Hustle Rules Patreon channel. And on that channel, you'll be able to ask me questions. You'll be able to talk about business and maybe throw out some ideas that we can all share together. So check us out on Side Hustle Rules Patreon every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Well, as I said, that's all I've got for you. As I always say, have a great day, everybody. Come on!